Have you ever wondered what it takes to change the course of history in just 15 minutes? Imagine this. It's moments past midnight on June 6, 1944. Six wooden gliders are silently descending through the darkness over Nazi-occupied France. Inside each glider, British soldiers sit in complete silence, their hearts pounding, knowing that in mere seconds, they'll either pull off the most audacious surprise attack of World War II or die trying. There are no engines, no parachutes, no second chances. Just 60 feet of French soil separating them from either glory or disaster. This is the story of how a handful of men in wooden coffins captured a bridge that Hitler thought was impregnable, and in doing so, opened the door for the largest seaborne invasion in human history. If you're fascinated by tales of incredible courage and military precision, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button now because we're diving deep into one of D-Day's most extraordinary untold stories. The date is June 5, 1944. Across southern England, the greatest military machine ever assembled is preparing to launch Operation Overlord, the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. While thousands of ships, planes, and soldiers are making final preparations for the dawn assault on the Normandy beaches, a very special group of men is about to undertake a mission that will determine whether those landings succeed or fail catastrophically. These men belong to D Company, 2nd Battalion, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, better known as the Ox and Bucks. They're commanded by Major John Howard, a former police officer turned professional soldier, who has transformed this company into perhaps the finest assault unit in the British Army. Howard is a perfectionist, a man who believes that brutal training saves lives in combat. For months, he's driven his men relentlessly, making them practice the same assault over and over again until they can execute it in their sleep. His men respect him, fear him a little, and would follow him into hell itself. Their mission? Capture 2 bridges intact before the Germans can destroy them. These aren't just any bridges. The Pegasus Bridge spans the Caen Canal, and nearby, the Horsa Bridge crosses the River Orne. Together, they form the only route for German panzer divisions stationed east of the invasion beaches to reach the Allied landing zones. If the Germans blow these bridges, the British 6th Airborne Division will be cut off and destroyed. If the Germans keep control of them, their tanks will roll across and massacre the troops landing on Sword Beach. The bridges must be captured intact, held against counterattack, and kept standing until relieved by the main invasion force pushing inland from the beaches. The stakes couldn't be higher. Success means the eastern flank of the invasion is secured. Failure means thousands of Allied soldiers will die on the beaches, and D-Day itself might fail. But here's what makes this mission absolutely insane. Major Howard and his 181 men will be landing in 6 flimsy Horsa gliders released from their tow planes at 5,000 feet, then gliding silently through the darkness to crash land within 50 yards of their objectives. 50 yards, in the dark, in hostile territory bristling with German troops, machine guns, and artillery. The pilots, themselves barely trained in night flying, will have perhaps 60 seconds to spot their landing zones and put these engineless aircraft down in exactly the right place. Miss by 100 yards and the mission fails. Come in too fast and everyone dies in the crash. Come in too slow and you stall and plummet to earth. There's no margin for error whatsoever. The planners have calculated that casualties will be at least 75%. Some estimates go as high as 90%. This is, by any measure, a suicide mission. And yet, when Major Howard asks for volunteers, every single man steps forward. Let's meet some of these extraordinary individuals. There's Lieutenant Den Brotheridge, Howard's second-in-command, just 26 years old with a pregnant wife back home. A natural athlete and born leader, Brotheridge is the kind of officer his men would follow anywhere. Then there's Lieutenant David Wood, a thoughtful, methodical officer who keeps a diary and writes poetry. There's Sergeant Wagger Tonkton, a tough cockney with a wicked sense of humor who keeps morale high even in the worst circumstances. And Lance Corporal Fred Greenhall, who at 34 is one of the oldest men in the company, a veteran who's seen it all and somehow always knows exactly what to do in a crisis. The glider pilots are equally remarkable. Staff Sergeant Jim Walwork, piloting the lead glider, is just 24 years old but already has a reputation as one of the finest glider pilots in the RAF. His co-pilot, Sergeant John Ainsworth, is even younger. Together, they'll be responsible for putting Major Howard and his command platoon down in exactly the right spot, at night, in enemy territory, with no engine and no second chance. The other pilots are all volunteers too, all young men who know the odds and don't care. They're going anyway.
For 6 months, these men have trained for this single mission. They've studied aerial photographs until they can recognize every tree, every building, every fence around their objectives. They've built full-scale mock-ups of the bridges and practiced their assault until they can do it blindfolded. They've rehearsed emergency procedures for every imaginable disaster. Howard has even made them practice with live ammunition, despite the inevitable training casualties, because he knows that men who've been shot at in training won't freeze up when it happens for real. But all the training in the world can't fully prepare you for what's about to happen. As darkness falls on June 5th, the men blacken their faces, check their weapons one last time, and board their gliders. Each man carries at least 80 pounds of equipment: weapons, ammunition, grenades, explosives, rations, medical supplies. The gliders are packed so tight the men can barely move. Some try to sleep. Most can't. They sit in the darkness, alone with their thoughts, knowing that in a few hours they'll either be heroes or corpses. At 22:56 hours, the 6 Halifax bombers begin their takeoff run, each towing a Horsa glider behind it. The gliders lumber into the air, pulled along by their tow ropes like enormous kites. Inside, the men are thrown around as the gliders bounce and yaw in the turbulent air. Some are violently airsick. All are terrified, though none will admit it. They climb to 5,000 feet and turn south toward France. The Channel crossing takes about an hour. The gliders cross the French coast near Cobourg, and suddenly they're over enemy territory. Far below, German searchlights sweep the darkness. Anti-aircraft fire bursts in the sky. But the gliders are too small, too quiet to be spotted. They glide on like ghosts. At precisely 007 hours on June 6th, Jim Walwork receives the signal from his tow plane. He pulls the release lever, and suddenly the tow rope falls away. They're committed now. No engine, no power, no going back. Just the whistle of wind over wings and the silent prayers of 30 men packed into a wooden box hurtling through the darkness at 90 miles per hour toward a target they can't even see yet. Walwork peers through the darkness, searching for landmarks. There, the Caen Canal, a ribbon of black water reflecting the faint moonlight. And there, the distinctive shape of the bridge. He's found it, but they're coming in too high and too fast. He throws the glider into a steep diving turn, losing altitude as fast as he dares. The men in back are thrown against their restraints as the glider banks violently. Someone is praying out loud now. Others are silent, gripping their weapons, knowing that in seconds they'll either be fighting for their lives or dead. Walwork levels out barely 100 feet above the ground. He can see the bridge clearly now, less than 200 yards away, but they're still too fast. He slams down the landing skid, deliberately dragging it through a barbed wire fence to slow them down. The glider shudders and shakes as the wire tears at its belly. Slower, slower, they hit the ground hard, bouncing, once, twice, then slamming down and skidding forward in a shower of sparks and tearing wood. The noise is tremendous, metal shrieking, wood splintering, men shouting. They're sliding straight toward a pond, completely out of control now. Is this how it ends? Drowning in a French pond before they've fired a single shot? Want to know what happened next? Keep watching, because what happens in the next 15 minutes will change the course of the war. The glider shudders to a stop. Silence falls. They're down. They're alive. And incredibly, they're exactly where they're supposed to be. just 47 yards from the bridge. 47 yards, Jim Walwork has just pulled off the most precise combat landing in history. But there's no time to celebrate. Inside the glider, Major Howard is already shouting, "Out! Out! Everybody out!" The side door is jammed from the crash. Men kick at it frantically. Finally, it bursts open and they pour out into the French night, weapons ready, moving exactly as they've trained. And that's when they realize something extraordinary. The Germans have no idea they're here. The crash landing was so loud, so violent that the German sentries think it was a shot-down bomber. They haven't raised the alarm. The British have achieved complete tactical surprise. This is it. This is the moment. Everything they've trained for comes down to the next few minutes. Major Howard points toward the bridge and gives the order they've been waiting 6 months to hear. Move. And with that, 60 British soldiers begin their sprint toward history, rushing through the darkness toward a bridge defended by 50 German troops who have no idea what's about to hit them. The fate of D-Day, the fate of the entire war, hangs in the balance. The clock is ticking. The battle for Pegasus Bridge has begun. Don't go anywhere. Part 2 is coming up, where we'll see exactly how these incredible soldiers captured their objective in one of the most perfectly executed small unit actions in military history.
Welcome back. In Part 1, we left Major Howard and his men pouring out of their crashed glider just 47 yards from Pegasus Bridge, having achieved complete surprise against the German defenders. Now we're going to witness one of the most perfectly executed combat assaults in military history, a textbook operation that's still studied in military academies around the world today. What happens in the next 15 minutes will prove that courage, training, and leadership can overcome seemingly impossible odds. If you're enjoying this deep dive into military history, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you don't miss Part 3, where things get even more intense. Let's set the scene precisely. It's now 0016 hours on June 6, 1944, 16 minutes past midnight. Major Howard's glider has landed perfectly. But what about the other 5? In the darkness and confusion, Howard doesn't know if he's alone or if his entire force has made it down safely. The plan called for 3 gliders to land near Pegasus Bridge on the canal and 3 more at Horsa Bridge on the river about 400 yards away. But plans and reality rarely match up in combat. As Howard's men form up, they can hear the second glider coming in. Staff Sergeant Oliver Boland is at the controls, and he's having problems. His glider is coming in too fast and at the wrong angle. The men on the ground watch helplessly as the massive wooden aircraft slams into the earth with tremendous force. Cartwheels once and crashes to a stop barely 30 yards from the first glider. It's a devastating impact. Inside, men are thrown around like ragdolls. Lieutenant David Wood is knocked unconscious. Several men suffer broken bones, but incredibly, they're all alive, and within seconds, they're staggering out of the wreckage and forming up for the assault. This is British phlegm at its finest. You've just survived a catastrophic crash landing in enemy territory, and your first thought is to get on with the job. The third glider, piloted by Staff Sergeant Lawrence, comes in moments later. He's seen what happened to Boland and adjusts his approach, landing smoothly about 100 yards from the bridge. All 3 gliders assigned to Pegasus Bridge are now down, and miraculously, despite the violent crashes, they've suffered only a handful of casualties, and everyone who can walk is ready to fight. Now Major Howard faces a critical decision. He doesn't know where the other 3 gliders are, the ones assigned to capture Horsa Bridge. He doesn't know if they've crashed, been shot down, or landed miles away. He has 3 platoons here at Pegasus Bridge when the plan called for him to have 6 platoons total across both objectives. Does he wait? Does he send someone to find the missing gliders? Every second of delay gives the Germans more time to react, more time to blow the bridges. Howard doesn't hesitate. He's trained his men to operate independently, and he trusts his officers. If the other gliders made it down, those men will complete their mission.
His job is here, now, at this bridge. He gives the order. Able Company, execute. Lieutenant Den Brotheridge's platoon moves first. They're the assault element, the tip of the spear. 28 men in single file, moving fast through the darkness toward the bridge. Brotheridge leads from the front, as he always does. Behind him, his men move like shadows, weapons ready, every sense alert. They've rehearsed this so many times that each man knows exactly where to go, exactly what to do, even in pitch darkness. The bridge is just ahead now, perhaps 50 yards away. They can see the distinctive framework of the steel structure silhouetted against the night sky. Somewhere on that bridge are German sentries. Somewhere nearby are machine gun positions, bunkers, possibly artillery. The Germans have had 4 years to fortify this position. Howard's intelligence briefings indicated at least 50 German troops in the immediate area, with reinforcements available from a nearby garrison. The defenders have all the advantages: prepared positions, crew-served weapons, knowledge of the terrain, and the ability to blow the bridge at any moment if they realize what's happening. And then, the silence is shattered. A German sentry on the bridge sees movement. He shouts a challenge, "Halt!" For a fraction of a second, everything freezes. This is the moment. If Brotheridge's men hesitate now, if they try to take cover, the Germans will have time to react, time to hit the detonators and blow the bridge. Everything depends on the next few seconds. Brotheridge doesn't hesitate. He charges forward, screaming at the top of his lungs, his men right behind him. It's a terrifying sight. British paratroopers emerging from the darkness, faces blackened, weapons blazing, shouting like demons. The psychological impact is tremendous. The German sentry fires a flare pistol, and suddenly the bridge is bathed in harsh magnesium light. But instead of revealing targets for the Germans to shoot at, the light reveals something far more frightening. British soldiers already on the bridge, already among them. This is where months of brutal training pay off. While the Germans are still processing what's happening, still trying to understand how the enemy has appeared in the middle of their position, Brotheridge's men are already executing their assault drills with mechanical precision. Grenades arc through the air toward the German bunkers. Sten guns chatter. Men move and fire, each covering the other, advancing in perfect coordination. The German defenders are well-trained soldiers of the 736th Grenadier Regiment, but they've been caught completely off guard. Most of them were asleep when the gliders landed. Those who were awake thought the crashes were downed bombers. Now, suddenly, they're in a close-quarters firefight with elite British troops who seem to know exactly where every German position is located. Because they do. Howard's men have studied aerial photographs and intelligence reports for months. They know this position better than the Germans who've been living here. Brotheridge is hit first. A burst of machine gun fire catches him in the neck as he charges across the bridge. He goes down hard. His men see him fall, but they don't stop. They can't stop. The momentum of the assault must be maintained. They surge forward, firing, throwing grenades, shouting. The noise is deafening. Gunfire, explosions, men screaming in English and German, the clatter of equipment, the whistle of bullets. Within 3 minutes of the assault beginning, Brotheridge's platoon has reached the far side of the bridge. They've crossed 100 yards of open ground, under fire, at night, and taken the objective. The German defenders are dead, wounded, or fleeing in panic. But there's no time to consolidate. Major Howard knows that somewhere in the German bunkers and pillboxes around the bridge are explosive charges, wired and ready to detonate. His men must find them and disarm them before the Germans realize what's happening and blow the bridge from a safe distance.
Lieutenant Wood's platoon, despite their rough landing, is now moving up to clear the buildings on the west side of the bridge. These are the positions from which the Germans can command the bridge with machine gun and rifle fire. The fighting here is vicious and close range. Grenades are tossed through windows. Rooms are cleared with submachine gun fire and bayonets. The Germans fight back hard. These are professional soldiers, and they're defending their positions with skill and courage. But they're confused, disorganized, and outnumbered at each point of contact. Howard's men are using classic infantry tactics. Concentrate force, hit hard, keep moving.
Never give the enemy time to organize a defense. Meanwhile, the 3rd platoon, under Lieutenant Fox, is securing the eastern approach to the bridge, setting up defensive positions to hold against the inevitable German counterattack. They know it's coming. Somewhere out there in the darkness, German officers are being woken up. German soldiers are grabbing their weapons. German armored vehicles are starting their engines. The British have captured the bridge, but can they hold it? Now let's talk about what makes this assault so remarkable from a military perspective. First, the speed. From the moment Brotheridge's men began their charge to the moment the bridge was secured took less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes! Modern military doctrine calls this violence of action, hitting the enemy so hard and so fast that they never have a chance to organize an effective defense. Howard's men executed this perfectly. Second, the coordination. Despite crash landings in the dark, despite being scattered across several hundred yards, despite losing officers to injury, these soldiers immediately formed up and executed their mission exactly as planned. This doesn't happen by accident. This is the result of those 6 months of relentless training where Howard made his men practice the assault over and over until they could do it automatically, without thinking, even under the stress of combat. Third, the leadership. When Lieutenant Brotheridge went down, his sergeant immediately took command and kept the assault moving. When Lieutenant Wood was knocked unconscious in the crash, his platoon sergeant got the men organized and moving. At every level, from Major Howard down to the individual lance corporals, leaders stepped up and made instant decisions that kept the operation moving forward. This is what separates elite units from regular troops, the ability to adapt and overcome when things go wrong. And things did go wrong. Den Brotheridge, Howard's second-in-command and one of the finest officers in the British Army, died on that bridge. He was hit in the opening seconds of the assault and bled out before the medics could reach him. He was 26 years old. His wife was pregnant with their second child. He would never meet his daughter. Den Brotheridge has the tragic distinction of being quite possibly the first Allied soldier killed by enemy fire on D-Day. His death devastated Howard and the entire company. Brotheridge was loved by his men and respected by his fellow officers. But there was no time to grieve. Not yet. The mission came first. By 00:26 hours, just 26 minutes after the first glider landed, Pegasus Bridge was secure. The German defenders were dead, captured, or fled. British engineers were frantically searching for demolition charges, and remarkably, the bridge was intact. Not a single explosive had been detonated. The Germans had been so shocked by the speed and violence of the assault that they never had a chance to blow the bridge. But what about Horsa Bridge? Remember, the plan called for 3 more gliders to land near the river crossing 400 yards away. Howard still had no word from them. In the confusion and darkness, he didn't know if that mission had succeeded or failed. In fact, it had succeeded brilliantly. The 3 gliders assigned to Horsa Bridge had also landed precisely on target. One of them actually crashed through a barbed wire fence and stopped on the bridge itself. The platoons assigned to that objective had executed their assault with the same speed and precision, capturing their bridge intact in less than 10 minutes. The Germans at Horsa Bridge were even more thoroughly surprised than those at Pegasus Bridge. Most of them surrendered without firing a shot. By 00:30 hours, both bridges were secure and intact. Major Howard's tiny force of 181 men had accomplished what many senior officers had thought impossible. They'd landed in the dark, in enemy territory, achieved complete surprise, captured their objectives in minutes, and suffered remarkably light casualties considering the odds. It was a perfect operation, executed with textbook precision. But now came the hard part, holding what they'd captured. Howard knew that German reinforcements would be coming soon. Intelligence suggested that there were Panzer units within 10 miles.
If German tanks reached the bridges before British reinforcements arrived from the beaches, Howard's men would be annihilated. They had no anti-tank weapons heavier than a PAAT, a spring-loaded bomb thrower that was notoriously unreliable. Against German panzers, they'd be like men with slingshots facing tanks. Howard set his men to digging in. Defensive positions were prepared on both sides of both bridges. Machine guns were sighted to cover the approaches. Ammunition was redistributed. The wounded were collected and treated. Prisoners were secured, and everyone waited, peering into the darkness, listening for the sound of approaching engines, knowing that at any moment the Germans would come. The men were exhausted. Most hadn't slept in over 24 hours. They'd endured the stress of the flight over, the terror of the glider landing, and the adrenaline surge of combat. Now, in the post-battle lull, the exhaustion hit them like a hammer. But they couldn't rest. Not yet. They had to stay alert, stay ready, because the real test was still to come. Major Howard walked among his men, checking positions, offering encouragement, projecting calm confidence even though he was just as worried as everyone else. This is what leaders do. They bear the weight so their men don't have to. Howard knew that relief was supposed to come from the 7th Paratroop Battalion, who were dropping inland to reinforce the bridges. But paratroop drops were notoriously unpredictable. Men could be scattered across miles. Units could take hours to assemble. He might be on his own until the main invasion force pushed inland from Sword Beach, and that wouldn't happen until well after dawn, hours away. And then, in the distance, they heard it. The sound of engines. Vehicles were approaching from the east. German vehicles. The counterattack was beginning. Don't miss part 3, where we'll see how Howard's tiny force holds out against overwhelming German counterattacks, waiting desperately for relief that may never come. The most intense part of this story is still ahead. Keep watching.
Welcome to the final part of our incredible story. When we left Major Howard and his men, they had just captured both Pegasus Bridge and Horsa Bridge in a lightning assault that took less than 10 minutes. But now, in the darkness of early June 6, 1944, they faced their greatest challenge yet, holding these bridges against German counterattacks until relief arrives. What happens in the next few hours will determine whether D-Day succeeds or fails. This is the story of courage under fire, of men pushed to their absolute limits, and of a defense so tenacious that it became legendary. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and hit the like button. It really helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. It's now approaching 0100 hours. Major Howard's men have been on the ground for less than an hour, but it feels like a lifetime. They've secured both bridges, set up defensive positions, and are now waiting for the inevitable German response. The sound of vehicle engines is getting closer. Through the darkness, they can hear voices shouting in German, the clank of tank tracks, the revving of motorcycle engines. The enemy is coming, and they're coming in force. Howard has perhaps 160 effective fighters. Some of his men are wounded, some are tied up guarding prisoners, and some are still searching for demolition charges that might be hidden around the bridges. Against him, German intelligence later revealed the enemy was preparing to throw elements of the 21st Panzer Division, the 716th Infantry Division, and various local garrison units, potentially thousands of men, supported by tanks, armored cars, and artillery. The math is simple and terrifying. Howard is outnumbered at least 10 to 1, possibly 20 to 1. But Howard has several advantages that aren't obvious on paper. First, his positions. The bridges themselves create natural choke points. Any German force trying to cross will be funneled into kill zones where Howard's machine guns can cut them down. Second, the darkness. The Germans don't know how many British troops are here. For all they know, this could be a major airborne landing involving thousands of paratroopers. Fear of the unknown will make them cautious. Third, and most importantly, Howard has men who absolutely will not break. They've trained together, fought together, and they trust each other completely. They know that if they abandon these bridges, the men landing on Sword Beach in a few hours will be slaughtered. They know that thousands of lives depend on them holding this ground. And British soldiers, when they dig in and decide to hold, are among the most stubborn fighters on Earth. The first German probe comes at 1:15 hours. A truck carrying about 20 German infantry approaches Pegasus Bridge from the east. The Germans are cautious, clearly uncertain about what they're driving into. Howard has ordered his men to hold their fire until he gives the signal. Let them get close. Let them think it's safe. The truck rolls closer, closer, its headlights cutting through the darkness. 50 yards, 40 yards, 30 yards. And then Howard gives the order, fire. The night erupts in violence. Bren guns, Sten guns, and rifles open up simultaneously. The truck is shredded, windows explode, tires burst. The German soldiers inside are cut down before they can even dismount. The few survivors bail out and sprint back into the darkness, leaving their dead and wounded behind. The entire engagement lasts perhaps 30 seconds. First blood to the British. But this was just a reconnaissance probe. The real attack is coming. At 1:30 hours, the Germans try again, this time with more force. 2 armored cars and several trucks approach from the east, carrying perhaps 50 infantry. This is a proper assault, coordinated and determined. The Germans have brought heavier weapons, machine guns, mortars, Panzerfausts. They mean business. Howard's men let them get within 100 yards before opening fire. The lead armored car is hit by a Piat bomb and explodes in a ball of flame, blocking the road. The second armored car tries to reverse but is hit by concentrated rifle fire. The German infantry dismount and take cover, returning fire. Now it's a genuine firefight. Bullets flying in both directions, tracers crisscrossing the darkness like deadly fireflies. This is where the British defensive position proves its worth. Howard's men are dug in, behind cover, with interlocking fields of fire. The Germans are in the open, trying to assault across ground that offers minimal cover. The British Bren guns are devastating. Slow, methodical, accurate fire that drops German soldiers with almost every burst. The Germans try to flank around, but Howard has positioned his men well. Every approach is covered. Every movement is met with fire. The firefight lasts for 20 minutes. Then, suddenly, the Germans break contact and withdraw. They leave behind at least a dozen dead and several wounded. Howard's casualties? 3 men lightly wounded. It's becoming clear to the Germans that this isn't going to be easy. But for Howard, each successful defense brings a new worry. His men are expending ammunition at an alarming rate. They have what they carried in on the gliders and what they could scavenge from the German positions, but it won't last forever. If the Germans keep probing, keep attacking, eventually Howard's men will run dry. And then what? Fix bayonets and fight hand-to-hand until they're overwhelmed? At 200 hours, Howard receives the best news he's heard all night. A runner arrives from Horsa Bridge with a message. The 7th Paratroop Battalion has begun arriving. Not the whole battalion. Paratroop drops had scattered men across miles of French countryside. But enough men have assembled to start reinforcing the bridges. Small groups of paratroopers are making their way to both objectives, dodging German patrols, crossing fields and hedgerows in the darkness. Help is coming. Not much, not yet, but it's coming. This is a crucial moment psychologically. Until now, Howard's men have been alone, completely isolated, defending these bridges with no idea when or if relief would arrive. Now they know they're not alone. They know that out there in the darkness, British paratroopers are fighting their way towards them. It's an enormous morale boost at exactly the moment they need it most. The Germans attack again at 2:30 hours, this time with even more force. Intelligence later revealed this was a company-strength assault, over 100 men supported by several armored vehicles and mortar fire. The Germans have realized that they're not facing a major airborne landing, just a small force holding the bridges. They're confident they can overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers.
They're wrong. The attack comes from multiple directions simultaneously, a coordinated assault designed to stretch Howard's forces thin. German mortars begin dropping shells around the bridges, trying to suppress the British defenders while their infantry advances. Machine gun fire rakes the British positions. German officers can be heard shouting orders, coordinating their men. This is a professional military operation conducted by experienced soldiers who've been fighting for years. But Howard's men don't break. They stay in their positions, return fire with disciplined precision, and make the Germans pay for every yard of ground. A German assault team tries to rush the western approach to Pegasus Bridge and is cut down by interlocking machine gun fire. Another group tries to infiltrate along the canal bank and runs into a British fighting patrol that annihilates them in a vicious close-range firefight. Everywhere the Germans probe, they find British soldiers who refuse to yield. Lieutenant Fox, commanding the defense of the eastern approach to Pegasus Bridge, demonstrates the kind of cool courage under fire that defines elite soldiers. His position is under heavy mortar fire, German bullets are snapping overhead constantly, and he's watching enemy infantry massing for an assault. Instead of taking cover, he walks among his men, adjusting their positions, pointing out targets, offering calm encouragement as if he's on a training exercise back in England. His sergeant later said, "The lieutenant acted like he was directing traffic in Oxford Street. Cool as ice he was. Made us all feel like we could hold off the whole German army if we had to." And in a sense, that's exactly what they're doing. Unknown to Howard and his men, their defense of these bridges is having strategic consequences far beyond their immediate position. German commanders, hearing reports of British airborne forces at the bridges, are holding back their panzer reserves, unwilling to commit their armor until they understand the scope of the Allied operation. The 21st Panzer Division, which could have reached the invasion beaches and caused catastrophic damage to the landing forces, is being kept in reserve because of uncertainty about how many British paratroopers are inland. Howard's tiny force is, in effect, fixing in place German units that outnumber them 50-1. At 300 hours, the situation becomes critical. The Germans have brought up a self-propelled gun, essentially a tank destroyer, and are using it to shell the British positions directly. The British have no weapons that can deal with this kind of armor. Piat bombs are ineffective against heavy armor at range. The self-propelled gun positions itself about 400 yards from Pegasus Bridge and begins systematically destroying the British defensive positions with high-explosive shells. This is a crisis. If the Germans can knock out Howard's machine gun positions, their infantry can cross the bridges. And if they cross the bridges, the entire position collapses. Howard makes a desperate decision. He calls for volunteers to conduct a suicide mission, cross the bridge under fire, infiltrate close to the self-propelled gun, and destroy it with Piat bombs at close range. 6 men volunteer immediately. Of course they do. These are British soldiers. This is what they do. Led by Sergeant Wagger Thornton, this tiny assault team begins making their way across Pegasus Bridge while the self-propelled gun continues firing. The noise is deafening, shells are exploding all around them, German machine guns are firing at anything that moves. But Thornton and his men keep going, crawling through the darkness, using every scrap of cover, getting closer, closer, closer. They get within 50 yards before they're spotted. German infantry open fire. Thornton is hit in the leg, but keeps crawling. Another man is hit in the shoulder. But they're close enough now. Thornton rises to one knee, aims his Piat, and fires. The bomb flies straight and true, striking the self-propelled gun in its side armor. There's a tremendous explosion. The vehicle brews up, flames shooting from its hatches. The German crew bails out, some of them on fire, running for their lives. The threat is eliminated. Thornton and his surviving men crawl back to British lines, dragging their wounded. When they get back, Thornton collapses from blood loss. The medic patches him up, and 20 minutes later, Thornton is back in position, rifle in hand, ready to fight again. When someone asks him if he needs to rest, he replies, "Rest? We can sleep when we're dead. Right now we've got Jerry's to kill." This is the spirit that wins wars. At 300 hours, just as dawn begins to break, Howard receives another piece of good news. More paratroopers from the 7th Battalion have reached the bridges, including the battalion commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Pinecoffin. Yes, that's really his name, Lieutenant Colonel Pinecoffin. You can't make this stuff up. Pinecoffin brings about 200 men with him, effectively tripling Howard's force. More importantly, he brings heavy weapons, more machine guns, mortars, and anti-tank guns.
The defensive position is now strong enough to hold off anything short of a full divisional assault. Pinecoffin tours the positions, talking to Howard's exhausted men, and is astonished at what he sees. These soldiers have been fighting continuously for over 4 hours, have repelled multiple German attacks, have suffered casualties, have expended most of their ammunition, and are completely exhausted, but their morale is sky high. They're joking with each other, sharing cigarettes, cleaning their weapons, and acting like they could fight for another week if necessary. Pinecoffin later wrote in his report, "These men of the Ochsenbucks are the finest soldiers I have ever seen. They have accomplished the impossible and don't seem to realize it." As dawn breaks fully at around 5:30 hours, Howard's men can finally see what they've been defending all night. The bridges stand intact, exactly as they captured them. Around the British positions are scattered the wreckage of the German counterattacks, destroyed vehicles, abandoned weapons, and the bodies of German soldiers who tried and failed to retake the bridges. British casualties have been remarkably light, about 15 men killed or seriously wounded out of the original 181. The Germans suffered at least 10 times that number. But the battle isn't over. With daylight comes a new threat: German artillery. The enemy has had time to bring up heavy guns, and now they begin shelling the bridges systematically. Shells scream in and explode among the British positions. Men dive for cover. The earth shakes with each impact. This is no longer small unit combat. This is industrial-scale warfare, and Howard's men are on the receiving end.
At 0630 hours, about the time the first Allied troops are landing on Sword Beach, a German infantry battalion launches another major assault on Pegasus Bridge. This is the most serious attack yet. Several hundred infantry, supported by mortars and machine guns, advancing under covering fire from their artillery. The Germans are determined to retake these bridges before British reinforcements can arrive from the beaches. The battle that follows is the most intense of the entire night. German infantry, despite taking heavy casualties, push closer to the bridges than they've managed before. Some German soldiers actually reach the western end of Pegasus Bridge before being killed in hand-to-hand fighting. British positions are being overrun. Machine gun crews are fighting with pistols and rifle butts. Ammunition is running critically low. For the first time, it looks like the British might actually lose these bridges. And then, at the critical moment, they hear it: the distinctive sound of British bagpipes. Lord Lovat's 1st Special Service Brigade, having landed on Sword Beach and fought their way 6 miles inland in under 4 hours, is arriving. Leading them is Lovat's personal piper, Bill Millen, playing blue bonnets over the border while bullets snap past his head. It's the most British thing imaginable, relieving a desperate battle while a man in a kilt plays bagpipes. The commandos crash into the German attack from behind, fresh troops with full ammunition loads, and the German assault collapses. The enemy falls back, regroups, and then withdraws. They've finally realized that they can't retake these bridges. The British are here to stay. At 1300 hours, 1 p.m., Lord Lovat crosses Pegasus Bridge and finds Major Howard. Lovat is only 2.5 minutes late from his planned link-up time, a remarkable feat of military precision. He shakes Howard's hand and says, "Well done, old boy. We're here as promised." Howard, exhausted beyond words, filthy, unshaven, having not slept in over 36 hours, simply nods. His job is done. His mission is complete. The bridges are held, the eastern flank is secure, and the D-Day invasion can proceed without fear of German panzers rolling across these crossings to massacre the troops on Sword Beach. The cost has been high. 28 men of Howard's original force are dead or seriously wounded. Lieutenant Denbrotheridge, that fine young officer with a pregnant wife at home, lies dead on the bridge he captured. His daughter will be born in 2 months, and she'll never know her father. But his sacrifice, and the sacrifices of all the men who fought here, saved thousands of lives on the beaches below. In the days and weeks that followed, the true scale of what Howard's men accomplished became clear. German commanders confirmed that the capture and holding of these bridges prevented them from launching their panzer counterattack when it might have been decisive. The 21st Panzer Division, which should have reached the beaches by mid-morning, didn't arrive until late afternoon, by which time the Allies had established a firm lodgment. One German general later stated, "If those bridges had been destroyed, or if the British had not held them, we would have driven your invasion into the sea." The operation also became a textbook example of how elite, well-trained troops can accomplish missions that seem impossible on paper. Military academies around the world still study the Pegasus Bridge assault as an example of perfect planning, training, and execution. The glider landings are studied as examples of precision insertion. The assault itself is studied as an example of achieving surprise and maintaining momentum. The defense is studied as an example of small unit tactics and leadership under fire. But perhaps most importantly, Pegasus Bridge demonstrates something fundamental about courage and determination. Howard's men were ordinary British soldiers, policemen, factory workers, clerks, farmers. They weren't supermen. They were just men who had been trained well, led well, and who refused to quit no matter how bad things got. When they were outnumbered, they fought harder. When they were running out of ammunition, they made every shot count. When they were exhausted, they found the strength to keep going, because they knew that other men, thousands of other men, were depending on them. Today, you can visit Pegasus Bridge in Normandy. Well, technically, you can visit a replacement bridge. The original was removed in 1994 and placed in a museum. But the museum is there, right next to the bridge, and it tells the story of what happened on that June night. You can see one of the original Horsa gliders. You can see the weapons the men carried. You can walk the ground they fought over. And if you stand on that bridge at night, when it's quiet and dark, you can almost hear the echoes of that battle. The crash of gliders landing, the shout of orders, the chatter of machine guns, the screams of wounded men, and the steady, determined voices of British soldiers refusing to break. Major John Howard survived the war and lived until 1999, long enough to see his men honored and their story told. He attended every reunion, maintained contact with his surviving soldiers, and never stopped honoring the memory of those who fell. He never claimed to be a hero himself. He always insisted that his men were the real heroes. But those men would disagree. They knew that Howard's leadership, his training, his courage, and his decisions under fire were what made their victory possible. The story of Pegasus Bridge reminds us that wars aren't won just by grand strategies and massive armies. Sometimes they're won by a few dozen brave men in the right place at the right time, doing the impossible because someone needs to and because they refuse to let their mates down. These men, British and American soldiers just like them across all the D-Day beaches, saved the world from tyranny. They paid a terrible price for that victory, but they never wavered, never broke, never surrendered. If this story moved you, do me a favor. Hit that like button, leave a comment telling me what you thought, and subscribe to the channel because next time we're diving into another incredible untold story from World War II that you absolutely won't want to miss. These heroes deserve to be remembered, and their stories deserve to be told. Until next time, remember freedom isn't free, and we owe everything to the men who fought for it.